the first question on here, and I'm really excited about this one, just because I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now. There's a lot of places that you can point to with problems that the Blazers are having, particularly this past week. So over the past 4 games, the Blazers have won just once. They're not playing well on offense or defense. During that stretch, they ranked 23rd in offense, 15th in defense. So the question is, which should be more of a concern to Blazers fans? Is it the offensive woes or a return to defensive mediocrity?
I'm going to say it's the offensive woes over the last week are much more concerning to me than the defense. I mean, the defense, was it better the first week? Yes. The competition also wasn't as good that first week, and players were fresher, start of the season. But they're still, 15th. That's right in the middle of the pack in terms of defensive rating.
That's 15th over the past 4 games as well.
Not the whole season. The whole season, I believe they're still in the top 10 in terms of defensive rating. So I'm not at all worried about that. I mean, they're in, obviously, besides Toronto, but they didn't lose the Toronto game because of defense, obviously. They had a 6-point second quarter. So I think it's the offense that you have to look at. Jared, I'll let Jared talk about how they look stagnant on offense. I know that's probably what he's going to get to. So I'll go a different direction. One thing that's concerning for me on offense is against these tough teams, the 4 teams they've lost to, the Raptors, the Clippers, the Jazz, the Bucks, possible playoff teams, the bench has completely disappeared. They are not getting anything from the bench. And their 4 wins this year, they're averaging 41 points a game from the bench. Obviously, it was helped. They scored about 60 or so against the Suns in that first game. But in the 4 games they lost, they're only getting 17 points from the bench. I mean, that's just not going to cut it. And in terms of offense, when you have Yusuf Nurkic maybe not performing at the level everyone expects, that puts a lot of pressure on Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum to get the scoring done for them, especially down the stretch where we've seen them, have some turnovers, maybe trying to do too much because they know the offense is going to rely on them and scoring points at the end of the game. Evan Turner was great that first week of the season, averaging 13, 4, and 4. Over the last, week, 6 points, 5 rebounds a game. That's what Evan Turner's giving you off the bench.
And 1 assist per game.
Yeah. And Pat Connaughton, he was averaging double digits. He's back down to around 5 a game as well, coming off the bench. Caleb Swanigan's minutes he hasn't played. He didn't play yesterday. Were disappeared with the addition of Noah Vonleh coming. And so I think they need to get production from those guys to kind of take the pressure off of their main 2 starting guards.
Doesn't playing bad teams help that, though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your bench is going to play more.
It does help.
Generally speaking.
But you shouldn't have that large of a discrepancy between your production against bad teams versus good teams. I mean, it's 41 points to 17. I mean, that's a huge, huge difference, and it shouldn't be that drastic.
Yeah, and if you're going to beat good teams, you need to get more than 17 points from your bench.
Yeah.
I mean, because unlike some other teams, not everyone in the Blazers starting 5, their strength isn't all on offense. Some of them are stronger defensive players, like Al-Farouq Amino, and you could probably throw Mo Harkless into that mix as well. And so they need to get something from that bench, and they haven't gotten it over the last week.
Do you think there's a player on the bench who you'd look to kind of step up and take the reins and push that forward? Because I'm not seeing a lot of leadership from the bench right now. They're all just kind of, maybe they're just playing their roles, but it seems like you need a leader on that bench to kind of step up and play well every game so that when other players don't have it, you can rely on one person.
Doesn't that have to be Evan Turner?
That's where I would go with it, is Evan Turner. I mean, he's a veteran. When he comes on the floor, the ball's in his hands much more than Pat Connaughton or Ed Davis. Ed Davis could certainly do that. He hasn't necessarily played poorly over the last week.
He's still played really well.
But not as strong as he did the first week of the season. He brings a lot of energy off the bench, but he's not a scorer.
No.
He gets those boards, and Ed Davis could also be better at the rim in terms of when he does get opportunities finishing at the rim. But it's got to be Evan Turner to me. I mean, he played so well that first week, and I think that takes a ton of pressure off Dame and CJ when Evan Turner is out there scoring, distributing the ball, getting rebounds, kind of doing an everything role guard, and I think they need that type of performance to return.
It's interesting. His usage rate is down. He's not running the offense like he was the first few games. It seems like he's deferring more to Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, and there's nothing wrong with that because those are the 2 stars of the team. But I think that Turner is most effective when he's out there running the offense, when he has the ball in his hands, and when he's being a little bit more aggressive, whether it's looking for his own shot or creating for others, and he's just not doing that right now. So I'm with you. He's the one who has to step up.
Yeah.
It's nice to have him as a defender as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's still been pretty good defensively for the Blazers.
I think the bench is still playing well defensively. That's why, like you said, Ed Davis isn't really a scorer. He's continued to play well in defense. He's continued to rebound. I don't think Davis has been a problem. I think that the bench has played well on defense. It's just they're not scoring the ball.
And I think it's too much to ask for Pat Connaughton to be the guy coming off the bench, who's the leader off the bench.
Right.
This is a guy that we didn't even think, and maybe he's coming back down to earth, and this will be more who Pat Connaughton is. Which, if that's the case, that's a scary thought for Blazers fans. You got a pretty limited depth there at the guard position.
Right. Maybe you get that boost from Connaughton every few games, but every night, I mean, that's asking a lot for someone to make that jump.
As far as the offense goes, I think the biggest problem is, I've heard talk about that, like you said, that they look stagnant on offense, that they're standing around, they're not moving without the ball, there's not a lot of ball movement, and I don't think that's actually true. I looked up how many miles these players are running around on the court every game, and they're just about exactly the same as they were last year. These players are still moving. They're still passing the ball. They're averaging the same amount of passes per game as they were last season. It's eerie. It was almost exactly the same amount. It's just they're not making shots. So it doesn't matter how much you move without the ball. It doesn't matter how much you pass the ball around. If you're shooting 42% from the field for the season and less than 40% over the past 4 games, your offense is going to struggle. And they're actually shooting better at the rim now, which is the problem they were having early in the season. For the last couple games, they've struggled to hit three-point shots. And in this offense, if they're not hitting three-pointers, then the offense is going to struggle. So I think that's actually something that, as a Blazers fan, maybe you can have a little hope that they're going to get through this, that it's just a shooting slump. This team is not full, but they have good shooters and they have good scorers. And they're going to make their shots. They're just missing them right now.
I think the initial answer to this question, when you think about things from the big picture, was, oh, it's the defense. The defense has been the problem historically with this team. It continues to be the problem, but that's not the case, and I think that's what makes this topic so interesting, is that something you thought was automatic, something that was the given in all of this equation, is no longer the case, especially in crunch time. You mentioned, I know the Oregonian had a story with Joe Freeman, just talking about how terrible they were from 5 feet away from the cup. Historic proportions. And then what do? They have the worst second quarter in Blazers history against the Raptors, scoring 6 points. And that layup that comes, with 5 seconds left or whatever it was. Man, what we're seeing right now is, to answer the question, is a concern.
Yeah. But I'm like Jared. I think it's more of a slump than a trend of what's to come for the Blazers this season.
And it's hard to bash them too much when you score 100 points, too.
Yeah, and the thing is,
the Jazz,
I think
the Jazz are a great defense. Offense wasn't really the problem last night.
Yeah, and the Clippers have been a good defensive team this year, and the Raptors have been too. So those 3 losses, all 3 of those teams are in the top 10 in the league so far in defensive rating this year. So it's not like they've been facing, teams that are poor defensively and then can't score against them. They're playing good defensive teams, which maybe that's part of the reason they're struggling to shoot. Maybe that's not. But I think it's just a slump. And I think a lot of our focus on the concern for the offense is because of the fact that they're 4-4.
Right.
They could easily be 7-1.
Yeah.
They're in position to beat the Bucks, to beat the Clippers,
in the last minute of every one of those games.
They've had the lead, and we'll get into that. They're good.
That's why we're nitpicking at the small things, because that's how close these games are, especially at the end. In the last 2 or 3 minutes when you're seeing these turnovers, you're seeing silly plays that you normally don't get out of Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum. And even though Dame has had pretty good fourth quarters and has kind of put the team on his back offensively, maybe, back to your guys' point, with the bench and what the bench isn't doing, maybe there's a little extra incentive, a little extra pressure on these leaders to get the job done, and maybe they're forcing a little more than normally.
You saw that late, especially with C.J. McCollum, but also with Damian Lillard in the game last night. And even if you just look at the last play of regulation, when Damian's shot, the little floater got rejected by Rudy Gobert, if you go back and watch that play, I'd like to see Damian. I'm glad that he didn't just shoot a three-pointer and that he actually tried to take it inside and challenge the defense. But maybe don't challenge Gobert. When he went up to shoot, Gobert was already rotating over to him, a second and a half before he even went up to shoot. And there were 3 players that converged on Damian Lillard, and right past Gobert was Nurkic. Wide open, the only guy in his way, and he was on the other side of the basket, was Jonas Jerebko. And I would love to see Damian trust in his teammate enough to dump the ball to Nurkic and give Nurkic a chance to redeem himself for the Milwaukee Bucks game and dunk that ball for a game winner.
This kind of goes into
it's
that.
hard. It's easier said than done. I totally get that.
It goes into that LeBron discussion of, you're the guy, the ball should be in your hands, you should take that game-winning shot versus you're the best teammate, you should get everyone involved. And so Dame's going to get criticized, I think, no matter what happens. And I'm guilty as well. I'm saying, why didn't he dish that ball? Why didn't he settle for the jumper? He might have had a better shot than having to go up over the top against Gobert.
I think it just goes back to that they're trying to do too much. And that's why their shooting percentages are down. I'm talking about Damian and CJ. And also their turnovers are up. And I think that they're just pressing a little too much.
Oh, totally. Especially when you see basic, fundamental mistakes out of CJ McCollum in crunch time. You're like, wait,
dribbling
what?
off your leg.
And you're not used to seeing that from him. He has such a great handle. So.
And I agree. I think that's what it is they're just pressing.
I agree.
Pressing a little too much.